And it happened in other parts of Europe as well. And a new system came in. And this new system we now call capitalism. It's the one we still have. It's about 300 or 400 years old. That's all. Which, as systems go, is kind of young. Been around a while. How does it work? Well, it's different from slavery because we don't allow people to own one another. And it's different from serfdom because we don't say if you're born over here to a serf, that's it, you're a serf too. We allow much more, this is very big, individual liberty and mobility. No matter who you're born to, I mean, do what you can. And here's how that system works. Everybody looks for what he or she is going to do. Those of you that are young are in that process now. Where am I going to go to school? What am I going to study? What course am I going to take? Who am I going to study? What credential, what mechanism to find a place in the division of labor? What am I going to do? Some of you worry a lot about it. You even pay people to advise you how to do it. You go to an institution that promises you that if you go there and you do real well, and you take the exams and you get the course credit and you get the degree, then you'll get a job. That's not happening anymore, but many of you haven't figured that out yet, and the hope of the system is you never will. But the smarter ones among you have already noticed, and the rest of you will find out soon enough. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. How does this capitalist system work? It's interesting. Here's how it works. The vast mass of people, here we go now, look for a job, which, by the way, they take as axiomatic, as the way life is. Even though, in fact, if you follow what I've said, that's not been the way life is at all. The child of a slave knew exactly what he or she was going to do, didn't need a school, didn't need an advisor. They were going to be a slave too, likely to the same master or the children of the master. The serf knew where he or she would be, what their lives would be like. No confusion there. No anguished adolescence trying to figure out what I'm going to do with myself. No problem. Capitalism brings you that dilemma because it's kind of open-ended. So you go around looking for a job. Now let's look at that for a minute. When you look for a job, you're actually looking for someone to do something to, with, for, or at you. I'll leave it to you to decide which preposition to use. You look for a boss. You look for someone to do something remarkable with you, to hire you, to engage you, to employ you. A serf never did that. A slave never did that. People who got together collectively did it. Nobody hired anybody else for the vast majority of the history of the human race. That is a very peculiar arrangement. And here's how it goes. You go to an employer, you say, here I am. I just graduated from MIT. Look at how white my teeth are. Please give me a job. I am very good at whatever. And you hope the employer will do that. That's why you went there. You're having an interview. And you have a conversation. And you talk about the work you will be expected to do, the work you would like to do, all of that bullshit. And then you come to the key moment. How much am I going to get paid? Because you need the money. Why? Because you need to buy a lot of things in order to avoid painful death. Food you need. You don't grow that yourself. Other than the little pot with the 4 arugula plants, you don't have much, right? So you need food, you need, underpants because it's polite, and all the rest of the things you need. And you don't make those yourselves, most of you, so you need money to acquire them. And the job you're going to get is going to give you the money to buy the things that will allow you to survive at least and have a pleasant life, maybe, if you're lucky, at best. So you enter into that key part of the conversation. How much, dear Mr. or Ms. Employer, are you going to give me? And this is a very interesting moment. And let's say you agree on something. Let's say you agree to be paid $20 an hour, or an annual salary that works out to $20 an hour, or 30, or it doesn't make any difference, but let's stay with 20. It's a nice round number. So the employer agrees to pay you $20 an hour. And you must agree in return to do a number of things. That's how this system works. Number one, you agree to come 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You have to come. You have to be reasonably well dressed. You have to be able to apply your brains and muscle. And you have to be willing to do what you're told to do with whatever the raw materials are there for you to work on and whatever tools and equipment are there for you to work with. And one more thing, really crucial. At the end of the 8 hours, typically, that you've used your brains and muscles in the way you've been told to, on the raw materials you've been given, you will have transformed those raw materials. Remember what I said at the beginning. Something provided by nature, you will have worked up into something else. Whatever the product is that your employer produces, a good or a service, whichever. And here comes the crucial thing. At the end of the day, that your work is embedded, embodied in the finished product that you've been told to produce, you must go home and leave the product of your work there. You made it, but you don't get it. And if you take a little of it home with you, the employer calls those men in blue uniforms and they come to your house and they hurt you to help you understand, no. You make this stuff, then you go home. At home, you drink beer, take off your shoes, go to sleep watching boring television so that you're in shape tomorrow morning to do it all again. Okay? The employer takes the fruits of your labor, and the employer decides what to do with it. Now, the most important point of all. The only way, the only time, the only circumstance on which an employer will ever give you $20 an hour, or 30 or 60 or 100, don't make any difference. One condition has to be met. During that hour that the employer pays you X worth of money, your labor has to produce for the employer more than X worth of extra stuff for him to sell. Why? Because otherwise there's nothing in it for him. If he pays you $20 an hour, and your hour's worth of work produces another $20 worth of whatever the product of that company is, which he sells for $20, what's he got? He sold for $20, used the money to pay you, he's got squat. And much as he likes you and his fellow man and woman, it's not going to happen. So there's one condition in capitalism under which you will get a job. You will have to produce more for your employer than the employer pays you. So for those of you that have been saying to one another, I'm not going to work for anybody who doesn't pay me what I'm worth, you don't understand this system. That's not going to happen. You're in the wrong country at the wrong time historically. That's more likely for you to be hit by lightning than to discover that situation. You are always going to be ripped off in your job in capitalism because that's the way the system works. But don't worry, there are a lot of people, including lots of economics professors, who will give you one story after another instead of what I just told you, so that you don't get distressed while you're being ripped off, because it might make you resist, which we can't have that. But in capitalism, it turns out we've got exactly the same kind of system as we had in slavery and feudalism. Why? Because the worker has to produce more, a surplus, than he gets, which goes to somebody else. It's the employer who sells the hour's worth of output you helped produce for $40 and pays you $20. And what's left over, he gets, just as the master got the surplus the slave produced, or the feudal lord got the surplus that the serf produced. One of the great insights of the most profound thinkers about capitalism is that capitalism wasn't the end of slavery or feudalism. It's a changed form of that. No more slave, no more serf, but surplus being produced by one part of the population, enabling another part to live off of it. That hasn't changed at all. And that means what also hasn't changed is in the heart of the capitalist system is a conflict, a tension, an opposition, a resentment, an anger, and a bitterness between those who are constantly producing more than they get and those who live off that difference. And if you're a capitalist, an employer, what of course is your interest? To give the worker the least possible while getting the most out of them, because that's the biggest surplus they can get. And the more surplus they have, the more secure they'll be. It's the same problem the slave master had in relationship to the slave, or the feudal lord in relationship to the serf. So for those of you that have already worked in your lives and wondered why, at the end of many a day, you felt somehow ripped off, it's because you were. And if you tried to find a place where you could shake off this sense of being ripped off, you found one. The neighborhood tavern that offered you at the end of your day a happy hour that you know was there, and given that name precisely because it was in a remarkable way different from all the preceding hours, wasn't it? So even a society like ours that doesn't want to face or admit any of this, does it despite itself. Can't help itself. Capitalism is a system premised on what Marx called exploitation, which he defined very simply and very carefully. Exploitation exists if and when the people who do the work produce a surplus that other people get and distribute as they see fit. That's why slavery is one kind of exploitation, feudalism is another, and capitalism is a third.